So you have to tell me, how does a college student at UW Oshkosh end up working with the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, among many other sports-related things? It must have seemed at the time like a dream job, hey, and now you're living it.
Well, in our business, we refer to the radio, TV, and film department at UWO as the Harvard of the Midwest.
Okay.
Now, I know that might be a little bit of a stretch, but they do have quite the program down there. There's only a handful of facilities in the state where you have a fully working TV department in college that cranks out half-hour shows, newscasts, sports shows, variety, comedy. I mean, we had a game show there. There were probably 8 to 10 shows back in the early 90s that were produced on a weekly basis. And part of the radio department, when it came to fulfilling your credits and taking courses, you would DJ 3 to 6 hours a week. And since I had played football at the time, I never got to do any broadcast. I would always do the play-by-play and color analyst for UW Oshkosh women and men's basketball teams and the baseball team during the springtime. And so I kind of cut my teeth doing that and got a job up here right out of college and at the competing station over at WLUK. I was an editor and producer and writer and making minimum wage of $5 an hour or whatever it was. And,
oh, yeah.
And again, that's a long time ago, but that's how I started. I really started right at the bottom, got lucky enough to land a job over at WFRV and started out as a sports camera guy, and I literally was kind of Larry McCarron, the Rock, his sidekick. Whenever he did an interview, I was shooting it. When we went to games across the country, I was on the field getting pictures of the guys. So that's kind of how I started, and then just slowly but surely worked my way up over the years.
Now, I had John Mino on the show with me. Now, did you work with him too, since you work with McCarron?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like, to quote the great Ron Wolf when referring to Al Davis, from those two guys, I learned a heck of a lot about the business on what to do, and I learned what not to do.
Both valuable, no, I know that.
Mino was a great mentor in many ways, especially on the radio side. He had done everything. I mean, he was doing the sports TV shows. He was doing live simulcasts, and there was a good 4-year stretch where I was pretty much both of those two guys, their producer, editor, writer, live shot guy, and photographer. And they call them photographers, cameraman is what it is.
Right.
So
great way to learn.
I worked with him over at 1360 WTAQ, or actually it was 1440 WNFL for a while. And he had his own morning radio show, so I'd be a sidekick on that one, and then help Larry and him during the night side on TV. So I got real lucky to get thrown to the wolves, so they say, with those two.
Absolutely. Now, besides this show, one of the things I do is play-by-play for Marinette Sports, and one of my favorite things that you've done is High School Sports Extra. A lot of people like that. How did that come to be? Now, I understand that you came up with that, right?
Yeah, you know what? At the time, nobody was doing it. And, those guys, they were the Packer guys, and John, Mino was the UW Green Bay Voice of the Fighting Phoenix. And at the time, we had all these people going out on Friday, and I was kind of in charge of everything else. That's pretty much what they did. They said, we got this covered. You can help us out with this. Hey, let's really build this high school thing. So I thought, gosh, from August to March, we're going out with crews all over from Marinette, Menominee, not as much up there because it's an hour away and there's only so many games. It's the same as Fond du Lac or Sheboygan. It's a haul. But we've got people all over the northeast Wisconsin area. And we get all these great highlights and footage and on Friday nights, and we're not doing anything with it. By midnight, it's an afterthought. And this was before the web really got big. This was before Facebook. This was before Twitter. So I said to him, you know what? If I'm going to be anchoring on Saturday night, why don't we do a half-hour high school show after it? We'll pick a team of the week. We'll invite a coach on, or a newspaper writer, or radio guy, whatever. Just find a guest, and then have a feature on a different athlete of some kind, or an individual, or a team in volleyball or soccer or whatever, and just really do a half-hour full show on the high school kids, and then now everybody's doing it.
Yeah, including me. I have a high school.
Yeah.
I have a player on at halftime for everything: baseball, basketball, football. I have a player on at halftime for every game. So I took some of that.
Yep. No, it was fun, and it's still. Let's put it this way: it's still on the air. I think we started it back in 2000, and it's 2018. So
yeah, quite a run.
Obviously, and you know what? It's cyclical. It goes with the kids and the families.
Oh,
when your kids are in high school and you guys and your nephew or your niece or somebody is on there, you look for the highlights. 3 years after they're out, you may have forgotten about your team, but then a couple of years later, all of a sudden you're wondering how your Pierre or Kimberly or Kaukauna or Little Chute or Marinette or Denmark or Clintonville or Seymour, all these little communities where sports still matter, you go and you get to see your kids on there.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great run for that show, but what about great run you've had with the Packers? I think you started in 95, great players, great teams, Super Bowls. It's probably hard, but what's your favorite memory over the years covering the Packers?
It's hard to take away from that 96 season and have anything compare to it. I mean, here I am 26 years old or whatever, 25 years old, right at, a couple years out. I started in 95. They lost to the Cowboys in the title game, and then, they had that great season. You go to Bourbon Street and New Orleans, and it was a whirlwind of an 8-day trip. But there are little things along the way. I had a blast covering when Don Granado was the coach of the Gamblers.
Okay.
I got to travel with them to the National Final Four down in Springfield, Illinois. Went on a road trip with them behind the scenes to Lincoln and Omaha on a Nebraska weekend with them. A couple trips with the Fighting Phoenix on the road during the NCAA tournament. When go back to that 96 team, and it was Norgard and Berlowski and Eric Bresch, who's now the coach at St. Norman. Eric Jackson was the point guard. PGA Championship. A couple in 2010, I think it was. Rory McIlroy was just coming up on the, just making up the ranks. I mean, he was just cracking the top 10, and here I'm doing a one-on-one with Rory McIlroy, and he's the nicest guy, 21 or 18, 19. I don't remember how old he was, but just normal guy with an Irish accent down in Sheboygan.
Right.
It was one of those things that it really brings you back down. I mean, I met a couple of NASCAR guys, Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Michael Waltrip, and it's allowed me to meet some of these people that you see on a daily, a weekly basis on the weekend, and you realize some of them are just normal people,
Right. Now, who's been your favorite player to interview over the years, good or bad? Like the most interesting interview that you've had, good or bad?
Good or bad? Wow, that's...
Anything stick out?
Huh. I got into it quite a few times with Al Harris.
Okay.
Remember Packer Corner?
Yeah, I do. I remember the hair.
Al was he was an interesting cat. You'd catch him on a good day, and he would be engaging and funny, but you just never knew where the conversation was going to go.
Okay.
And you could say something you thought was completely harmless, and he would snap at you and turn the tables on you in a second. And then at the end, it was all good. He'd want to give you a handshake or whatever, but he'd like to be feisty on camera every now and then.
Sure.
I think for the most part, it's no different than any high school locker room. You got 1/3 of the guys who are loud and want to talk and have a good time. You got another third who, they could take it or leave it, but they'll do interviews. And then you got another third who just do not want to do it. They're not comfortable, and it's just not their cup of tea.
Exactly. Now let's get to this year's team. What are your expectations for the team?
You know what? It's funny. Everyone has the schedule out in front of them, and you look at it and you break it down, and you go, "Oh, that's a win. That's a win." And there's always one way, one the other way, where you go, "Yeah, I was way off on that one." I honestly don't think, and I'm not trying to be a homer here. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, Jimmy Graham stays healthy, there's no reason this team couldn't go 12-4. I also feel like when you look at the schedule, the way it sets up for them, there's no reason they can't start the season 6-0.
Right.
They've got a 4 out of 5 game stretch there in the middle that is brutal, though. You're talking road trips to the East Coast to New England, then turning around going to the West Coast to the Rams. You got one easy one in between, and then I believe you got at Seattle on a Thursday, and then at Minnesota the opening weekend of deer season on Sunday night. So those 4 out of 5, I mean, I think 2 and 3 would be a good during
thing,
that
yeah.
stretch.
Right.
Yeah, and then you got Atlanta and Arizona, I think, early on, and then 3 to finish. I think 12 and 4 in a division championship wouldn't be asking too much. Could it be 10 and 6, 11 and 5, make it as a wild card? That could also be the case. But as we saw last year, none of it happens if Rodgers is
right.
there. I think Deshaun Kaiser gives them a better chance than Brett Hundley. I'm on board with that trade, moving Hundley out of here. I think Deshaun's upside in the long term is just definitely better.
Now, you mentioned Jimmy Graham. What do you think is the biggest offseason move they made? Do you think it's that, or do you think the draft where they tried to help out the defense? What do you think was the biggest move this offseason?
If it isn't Jimmy Graham, I think the biggest move is bringing in Mike Pettin as defensive coordinator.
There you go, yeah.
I really do. I think Jimmy Graham's impact, though, with Aaron Rodgers, I think you're going to see something truly special. They haven't had that since it was a two-man tandem with Keith Jackson and Mark Chmura. And I think Jimmy's height and Aaron's precision, Jimmy's ability to leap, and Aaron's ability to roll out inside the red zone, they're just going to be monsters down low, down in between the 20s, to the goal line. I would not be surprised if he has 12 touchdown catches this year.
Now, cuts just happened. Were you surprised by any of the cuts?
I think on paper and by name only, people look at Aaron Ripkowski and Vince Beagle as the two guys that you go, that's interesting. But clearly, Mike brought Joe Carriage back at fullback. I think Ripkowski is more of a bulldozer and a grinder, a little bit stiff, and never materialized into the John Kuhn type that they were hoping for. John would blast a hole, but he could also catch the ball out of the backfield, and you could count on him for that 1 yard to be slippery in between the tackles and have the power and leg drive to get it in on the goal line, or 4th and 1 on the 40. He just never materialized that way. I think the same goes for Beagle. They were thinking Clay Matthews light and never really turned it on and showed much during training camp. I mean, he had some tackles in the last couple of preseason games, but unfortunately for Vince, he's kind of the odd man out. And this is a game where if you play light and you play, if an offensive tackle gets his hands on you and you get no rush, you have no chance in this league. And then clearly,
Absolutely.
Reggie Gilbert showed that he could push either in a bull rush or get past most of those offensive tackles where Vince Beagle did not.
Now, as far as the division, how do you see the NFC North this year? Which team do you think gives the Packers the most competition this year?
Oh, I think the addition of Kirk Cousins with Minnesota clearly makes the Vikings stand out more than most. But don't sleep on both the Lions and the Bears. They
Tough division, yeah.
They made decent moves in the offseason. You could see this. You could make the argument for this being the most competitive division.
I agree.
When all said and done, with a couple teams 7-9, one team 8-8, maybe one team 11-5, and another team 12-4. With all four teams at or above 500.
Yeah, any of those teams can win any Sunday. There's no cupcakes in that division, I don't think, this year.
No. I think the Bears, they're going to do it the way they always have, defense. Trubisky's got a ways to go before he can become even considered a game changer at quarterback. The Lions have a game-changing quarterback, and what's suspect is their defense.
Yeah.
So those are two opposite teams in that regard. We know what Minnesota brings. I think if they stay healthy and Dalvin Cook is a shell of himself and what he showed last year as a rookie, look out. Minnesota's going to be right there again.
All right, Burke. Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate the time. I know you're busy. I'll let you go, and good luck with everything. We'll talk soon, okay?
All right, Greg. You take care, buddy.